Arch Linux is an excellent distribution that has made a lot of positive traction in the last few years. Whereas it used to be known as more of a little bit unstable and certainly difficult to use, that is not really the thing anymore. Gone are those days where you have to run through every line of the documentation and install things one step better than Gentoo, as it were. But today we're going to look at how you can install Arch using the Archinstall script, and we're going to talk about a brand new feature that just rolled out with that. So stay tuned. Thanks for checking out this video from Switched to Linux. If you like this type of content where we talk about Linux, using Linux, and why you might want to use Linux, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and you will get some regular content. Leave us a like and a comment down there as well, and double check if you are still subscribed if you would like to be. With that, though, we are going to go ahead and chat a very brief moment about Arch Linux, and then we'll get into the actual installer. So Arch Linux differs from most of your other Linux distributions like your Debian or Ubuntu's or things in that it is an active rolling distro. Once you install Arch, you keep up with the updates and there is never a need to reinstall. It is truly what Windows attempted to be. Remember when they're like, Windows 10 is the last version of Windows. Haha, JK, Windows 11. But in this case, it is true. Arch never has a new version. You never have to reinstall it. You never have to redo your files. It's like on, my favorite Linux Mint. They have a new point release and then they have a new major release. Now they have a really good upgrade path, which make things easy. In some cases, in those situations, it's sometimes better just save your files, wipe your machine, reinstall it, and reinsert your files. That can carry with it a few negatives as well, but that's how a lot of distros work. Debian does that on a little bit slower roll. Ubuntu does this. Of course, they have an LTS branch and a more, it's not a rolling branch, but they have a point release branch. Fedora has a point release branch. But the fact of the matter is, Arch Linux itself carries with it a lot of positives in that once you install it, you just keep up with the updates and there's never a new version that you have to wipe everything and go back. It also works with the absolute bleeding edge software. Now, this is a major positive if you're running latest hardware, in which case your latest hardware is going to be supported faster. It is a downside if you do not like your applications changing and things go wonky. So, for example, right now, my media system I run is an Arch-based system called Endeavor OS, which is a great distribution. But Arch rolled the latest version of Kodi, which was broken with some elements in Arch, and it prevented you from being able to pretty much play anything, which is the whole purpose of Kodi. So I had to roll that application back to a previous version. I've had to learn how to do that. There's a few rare cases where that happens. Manjaro, which is based on Arch, I had cases where Bluefish Editor wasn't working, and I need that for a day-to-day basis, so I had to go back and roll back to those versions. Those are rare cases. Those are really the only two I can come up with in 5 years of using Arch daily. But occasionally you'll get something like that. If you do not like your software to change around on you, then Arch probably isn't for you. Major advantages, though, is it is very, very well documented, and there is it supports nearly every desktop environment, and it rolls things better than nearly everything else. So there are a lot of very good, very compelling reasons to use Arch. So what we're going to do here is we just simply installed the latest Arch build, which at the time I'm recording this video is the June 1st. And what we are going to do is we're going to use the Archinstall script, which is available on that distro. So there's nothing else you need to go out the internet to get, except one thing we are going to do is a new version of Archinstall was just released this week. We are going to upgrade to that, and I'm going to show you the major new feature in that, which is now the ability to set logical volume management, which gives you it more dynamically uses your disk rather than setting it all up, spacing everything out. It basically manages data a little bit better. But we'll go ahead and have a brief look at that. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the installer and see what that is going to look like. All right, so here we are. So unlike a lot of your Linux distributions, Arch is going to boot up into a command prompt. And this is why it's not the first best distribution you might want to use unless you want to learn how to use the terminal prompt. And this is where some people say, I don't want to use Linux. You got to use that command prompt thing. Only if you really want to. Or, hey, if you're trying to install Arch. Now, they do have a link here to an installation guide, which is on their website, and that's going to give you a lot of extra information and things. But what we're going to do is we want to run the Arch install script. So this is simply called Archinstall. So let's go ahead and type in Archinstall, and the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to check the version of it, which it should be 2.8, I think, 2.8.0. Now there's a new version of this which has a new feature, so we're going to run now you can see from the hash there, so if you notice there's a hash, a shift 3 there, that means we are executing as a root. If you see a $sign, you are executing as a user. And so with this being is that we are root, we don't have to do anything, any sudos or anything like that. So we're going to type in pacman, which is the management. We're going to do dash capital S lowercase y. This is going to install a new version of a package from the repository, and we're going to go with the Archinstall. If you type your tab, then you'll see other options that there are in there. So if we just do pacman-sy Archinstall, hit enter, it's going to update the databases, and then it's going to install the new version, which you can see is 2.8.1. Hit yes. And then we're going to wait for that to finish. And hopefully my virtual machine doesn't need readjusted. It looks like it might need readjusted down there. Let me go ahead and fix that. I'll be right back. All right, so it looks like this is the best I can do here as far as the size of this. So we'll go ahead and run with this. I'll just get my ugly face off the screen and we'll run through this guy here. So now let's go ahead and check our Archinstall version. Now that should be 2.8.1. There you go. So if you need the newer version, of course, the older version worked just fine. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to type in Archinstall. And what this is going to do is it's just going to run us through this command prompt. So we want to start by selecting our language, and we are already at English. So I'm just going to go ahead and push down. Under our mirrors, we want to set a mirror region. So the mirrors means it's going to check your repositories, and ideally you would like your repositories to be in your country. So since I am recording this in the United States, I'm going to come down, highlight United States, push the space button to select it, and we can push enter, and you can see that now our mirror region is set back to United States. And now our locales, just double check, keyboard layout US English, that's perfectly fine. So I don't want to make any changes to that. Of course, if you are not in United States, then you're going to want to go ahead and change that, and then you can check your language and your local encoding. Those are both set for United States. Now we need to do our disk configuration. So we want to start with partitioning, and you can do manual partitioning, you can do pre-mounted. What I want to do is your best effort default partition layout. In most every case, this is going to solve your, it's going to do everything set up right, so you don't have to look up exactly what needs to be what. So the loopback device is actually the ISO that we have in the virtual machine right now. I'm just going to go ahead and hit space over this one, which is my primary hard drive. You can see that it is 32 gigabytes. We'll hit enter, and then we can choose our file system. ButterFS, ext4, XFS, and F2FS. I'm going to do ext4 because that's usually what I do. Now the logical volume management, this is the brand new one. And so you'll see it says beta. So I don't know, do we want to try this, or should I go with the one that I know works? That's a good question. I think I'm going to go with the one I know works. So just understand LVM, you might want to do that. It basically manages your data a little bit better. It only utilizes your disk space as it needs rather than filling everything up and spacing everything perfectly and things. So I'm going to use the top one just because I know that's the one that's going to work for me. And now we can use the best effort to, let's see. Hold on. There we are. Now we're good. All right, so I just basically hit the button and went back through. Now disk encryption. Do we want to encrypt the disk or not? So we have the no encryption, or we have Lux options as well. So we can escape to skip, or if we want to set up disk encryption, you can do that. So if you want to choose your disk encryption, here's your password type. Encryption is really good. I'd highly recommend using a form of encryption if you are like on a laptop or anything that's more portable. In this case, since it's a virtual machine, I'm just going to skip the disk encryption. And then bootloader, you want to make sure that you have your bootloader. We have Grub and we have Limene. I have not worked with Limene before that I know of. So I'm going to make sure we just stick to Grub, and then your swap. So would you like your swap to use swap on ZRAM? Generally, swap is going to allow better memory management, and you also would need swap specifically set for hibernation if you need that. Hostname, this is just the computer, whatever you want it to be. And then you can do a root password. Now, if you leave this blank, it's going to disable the root user. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that one blank. Whoop, hold on. I accidentally pushed a button and I didn't mean to. All right. We're going to hit enter, leave that blank. Okay. User account. Now we're going to add a user, and we're going to enter a user. I'm just going to call this guy Arch, and then enter the password for Arch. I'm going to enter my password. You'll see that nothing shows up on the screen at all. Okay. It tells me I have a weak password. It's definitely not 123. So should Arch be a super user? If you left your root blank, you want to turn this option on. Otherwise, you will have no way to manage or administrate your computer. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And you can see we have Arch. It tells us a password, and it tells us that we are in this sudo group. So the sudo group means that we are able to use this user as an administrator as we need to. We're going to confirm and exit. Now we have profile. So let's have a look at our profile. So we can choose a desktop, we can choose a minimal, a server, or we can use Xorg. So what these are going to do is the desktop gives us a full desktop environment. So we have a variety of different desktops. The minimal gives us just Arch running on a command line. Server gives us Arch on the command line with the elements we need to run a server. And Xorg gives us the X environment, kind of like there's X and there's Wayland. I'm going to pick your desktop, and then here we can choose which environment we would like to use. Now, when I did this the other day, I ran Cinnamon because it has the latest 6.2 Cinnamon if you want to test that out. Oh, look at that. We can run the Deepin desktop environment. I haven't run that one in a long time. It'd be neat to see how that's progressing along. KDE Plasma right now is attractive to me. What I want to look at right now is some desktop environments have software managers built in, and I would kind of like to see if they automatically configure those. I know for the most part, despite GNOME having the software manager, generally does not configure it. Deepin has a software management as well. I'm curious if that will configure itself, and Plasma has Discover. I'm curious if that will configure itself. So I am really, oh man, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know. I'm lost here. Should I run the safe KDE Plasma or run Deepin that I haven't looked at in a long time? Oh man. All right, we're going to run Plasma. All right, so we're going to push Plasma. We're going to hit enter, and this tells us we go back to our desktop. Now, our graphics driver, do we want to use all open source, or do we want to go with any closed source proprietary? So you can see here, depending on what you are using, you can run a variety of things. You can see that we have open source Novudo. Sorry guys, I don't use NVIDIA. We have this open source driver. We have the proprietary drivers if you want to use that, or we have the open kernel module for newer GPUs. So we have options there. If you're running NVIDIA, we have Intel generally works, and AMD ATI generally works. Now, since I am inside of a virtual machine, I'm just going to go ahead and choose the VM and VirtualBox open source drivers to run. That way, it'll work a little bit better out of the box. Now, of course, in your case, choose the drivers which match your graphics card, and if you're running NVIDIA, you have the choice between the open source, which may not work as well, and the proprietary, which work well, but we have the options. Now, as far as our greeter, This is your login. Now you can see it automatically selected SDDM. That's because SDDM is generally the default for Plasma. If you're running Cinnamon, when I ran that the other day, your default is going to be Light DM. If you run GNOME, your default is it GDM, I think? I don't know. Let's push this guy here. GDM. Yeah, GDM is for your GNOME. Light DM, you'd see that on Cinnamon. Or a few other ones. We're going to go with SDDM because it's the default for running Plasma. And then audio, you can set up. Do you want no audio at all? That's boring, right? You want to be able to listen to something. With these two here, Pipewire has come along, and Pulse Audio is kind of like the older one. I would use Pipewire unless you know it's not going to work in your case. Now, as far as your kernels, we have our Linux kernel. This is the basic one. We have a hardened kernel. We have a long-term kernel, and we have a Zen kernel. So the long-term one, the kernel will not change a lot. It's going to stay more stable. The Linux kernel is just your basic whatever rolls. Your hardened, I'm forgetting exactly which ones are which now. I believe your hardened are streamlined for more security type stuff, and I think Zen might be one of the ones with some of the newer features. I'm just going to go ahead and keep that the default Linux kernel. Now here we can choose extra packages. So if you know for sure what the extra packages are you want to install, you can go ahead and do those. So I know, for example, I like LibreOffice. Now in Arch, you have two options. You have LibreOffice Fresh and LibreOffice Still. I like the Still option better. The Still basically stays on the latest LTS release, whereas the Fresh updates with single thing. And I hope it's LibreOffice-Still. I think it is. We're going to go ahead and run with that. Let's run Evolution. That's my preferred email client. Let's do Bluefish, which is a good editor. Let's do FileZilla. I use that. And I think we're going to go ahead and stick with that. We're going to go ahead and click the button there, and that's going to go back and say, okay, our packages. Now, our network configuration, if we don't do anything here, then we're going to have to mess with our network later on. So we can copy the ISO network configuration. We can use Network Manager, which is necessary to configure internet graphically in GNOME and Plasma. Or we can use a manual configuration. So if we just use Network Manager here, then everything should work out of the box for us. So we're going to go ahead and pick that. Your time zone, you want to pick where you're at. I'm in America and New York. So let's just go ahead and find that. Okay, so America, New York, just highlight it, push enter. And then do you want your automatic time sync? We'll say yes. Now there's optional repositories if you want to add any other repositories. I don't want to do that. And now we're going to hit the install option. So it sets all of the things that we want to set. It did the mirror check. It looks at your packages to install. And you can see the graphics driver is the VirtualBox in this case. SDDM, we're running Plasma. We got to hit enter to continue. And it's going to give us a 5-second countdown before it formats our drive. Okay, so you can see now it is doing its thing. And once it gets to this step here, it generally is not going to take a long time to do everything. You can see right now it's downloading 600 megabytes. That's going to be dependent on the speed of your internet. And then we're just going to let the thing go, and then it'll get to the end, and it'll tell us either good or, whoops, something went goofy. So we're going to go ahead and pause the video here, and we'll come back when it's done. So the installation is complete, and the last thing it asks us to do here is, would you like to chroot into the newly created installation to perform any post-installation configuration? Generally, you do not need to do this. Now, you would need to if you need to make any other system adjustments or tweaks, anything like this. I'm going to go ahead and toggle this down to no. And now it says installation completed without any errors. You may now reboot. So we have booted up into our SDDM. I'm going to change this from Wayland to X because Wayland just doesn't work super well on my virtual machine. At least on this one. I could probably move over to GNOME boxes, but I didn't think about that before we started. So we're going to boot into X. and we'll hopefully land on the desktop here. And here we have landed on Plasma. We should be Plasma 6.1, I think, at this point in time. Let's see if I can remember what my system configuration is. Info Center, I think it is, will give us information about our system. I believe we're in Plasma 6.1 at this point in time, which was just released. So yeah, KDE Plasma version 6.1.0. Note our Qt version is 6. We're going to need that here in a bit. I also did go through and I installed Firefox because I'd forgotten that it didn't have even a web browser installed. So I did that in my initial testing here. So here we've landed on our desktop, so you can walk through your additional layout settings here on Plasma. And the one of the reasons I went with this one is we were curious to know if Discover would allow us to install applications by default. And indeed, it actually does not, just like in GNOME. Now, I have tried to install the application in the past on GNOME, and it still would not get me working right. And I'm just saying, never mind, I use Pacman usually anyway. But here you'll see that to use Discover for Arch, you need to install the package kit. And this is going to be package kit-QT6 since we're QT6. And so you can go ahead and have a look over here. Now, they haven't done it because there could possibly be some issues because it's a rolling system. So let's just go ahead and boot up a terminal here. And let's do a sudo pacman S. We can just do S. That's probably fine since we just installed. We're going to do package kit-QT6. Again, if you were running a Qt5 desktop or something, you'd want to use Qt5, but we're running Qt6. Enter your administrative password, and then I'm going to go ahead and do that. And this might require a reboot as well. I'm not totally sure about that. It will, at least the bare minimum, need to reboot Discover, if not the whole system itself. So there you go. So let's go ahead and just search for something. Let's do Audacity. And so here you can see that we can install Audacity over here. We can see our licensing. We can see what version we have. Now, if you wanted to do Flatpaks, you can install Flatpaks, and then there's a way to get this to work as well. But this is pulling everything in from the from Arch. So this is actually infinitely painless, which is not the experience I've had with GNOME. So now we can install software through Discover here on Plasma. Now, I have a whole rundown of how to use the Plasma desktop environment, so we're not going to spend any other time over here. Here you can see our network manager is up. That's what we were expecting. Here is, we installed FileZilla. We installed the Office Suite. We installed Evolution, and we installed Bluefish Editor. So those were all things that we have installed when we set the configuration up. So everything is good and works well. I did try this on my virtual machine under Wayland. It just doesn't work. I get a lot of screen flickering. Now, the other thing that I did is I had to reinstall the system in pure transparency, and I installed it this time without the VirtualBox drivers, and it actually works a lot better without the VirtualBox drivers. I was wondering if that is what possibly fixed the system the other time as well, but yeah, for whatever reason. So there is our look at installing Arch with the Archinstall script, which is available directly on the Arch download. So if you're wanting to play this, hey, you have a easy to install Arch system. It just requires going through the command line instead of going through a nice, beautiful GUI package manager. And of course, there's no live testing the system with that download as well. But if you do know what you need and you want to do a quick install, running through that script works. I did install it several times on several different occasions in the past. I've always had good luck with that Archinstall script, and with the new changes for the LVM management and things like that, that is certainly a benefit. So there is hopefully enough information to get you running an Arch system on whatever desktop that you would like, and maybe even how to configure things like Plasma to set up installing things from the Arch repositories as well. With that, leave a comment down below, subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.